This is a lesson on the ins and outs of Latin's indirect statement. Let's first start with a direct statement and start in English. Direct statement, Caesar is brave. It's just a direct statement. It's just a statement being made. If we rephrase that statement in relation to another verb, which we in Latin teachers like to call head verbs, verbs that come from your head, like knowing, thinking, hearing, seeing, perceiving, understanding, verbs and actions that originate from your head, we get an indirect statement. So instead of just the direct statement, Caesar is brave, we now have rephrased that statement indirectly. I know that Caesar is brave. Cicero thinks that Caesar is brave. Pompey hears that Caesar is brave. The direct statement is now being recast or rephrased in reference to another verb that introduces it as an indirect statement. Notice the introduction of the English word that every time. Now in Latin, an indirect statement is called oratio obliqua, oblique speech, means roundabout speech. Whereas direct statement, oratio recta, you can see rect as part of direct. Direct speech, straightforward, right speech. Caesar is brave, which very easily in Latin can be rendered Caesar est fortis. Caesar est fortis. But if I wanted to restate this direct statement with another verb, it becomes an indirect statement. So I know that Caesar is brave. You can't just put the Latin for I know in front of this sentence and call it a day. You have to alter this a little bit. So in Latin, an indirect statement, the subject will be in the accusative case. The subject will be in the accusative case. The verb will be an infinitive. The verb will be an infinitive. Let me show you. So I know, scio. I know that Caesar is brave. There is no word in Latin that corresponds to that, the same that English is using right here. Do not put id or quod or ut or ille or illud or anything like that. The only thing you need to tip you off that you are now in an indirect statement is that the subject is an accusative, the verb is an infinitive. So I know, ordinary normal, I know, that Caesar, he is the subject of the indirect statement. I put him in the accusative. Caesarem is the verb in the indirect statement. I'm going to make that an infinitive. The infinitive of sum esse is esse. Now we can't have fortis be the nominative to agree with the nominative Caesar. We need fortem, the accusative, to agree with the accusative Caesarem. Same thing with the other examples. Cicero thinks that Caesar is brave. It would just be Cicero existimat or putat Caesarem esse fortem. Pompey hears that Caesar is brave. Same thing. Pompeius audit Caesarem esse fortem. Now, what if the tense of your verb is not present, but is a past tense? So instead of Caesar is brave, we have Caesar was brave. Caesar erat fortis. I mean, he's no longer with us. He did die. So I know, right now in the present tense, I know that Caesar was brave. He used to be. Cicero thinks that Caesar was brave. Pompey hears that Caesar was brave. Now, we need to change the tense of this infinitive. How do you know which tense of the infinitive to use? Well, there are three tenses of the infinitive in Latin. There's the present tense, the perfect tense, and the future tense. So you have three options. It's based on the relationship to the main verb. So the relationship between this verb in the indirect statement, the infinitive, and the main verb that introduces the indirect statement. So it was easy in the previous example. I know that Caesar is brave. I know at present tense that Caesar is brave at the same time, which we call contemporaneous. At the same time, Caesar is brave. And we use the present tense. But now, I know that Caesar was brave, was happened before the introductory verb, the I know. I know that Caesar was previously, in the past, brave. We say that this action is prior, before this action. So now we have to change this present tense of the infinitive to the Latin perfect tense, fuisse. I know that Caesar was brave. I know in the present time that Caesar was, in the previous prior past time to this, brave. The same thing with the other examples. Cicero thinks that Cicero existimat putat Caesarem fuisse fortem. Pompeius audit Caesarem fuisse fortem. And likewise, if we once again change the oratio recta from a present tense or a past tense to a future tense, Caesar will be brave. Caesar erit fortis. I know that Caesar will be brave. It's kind of odd, but roll with it. I know that Caesar will be brave. If you guessed we're going to use the future infinitive because this is a subsequent or afterwards action compared to this, you are correct. Be careful with future active infinitives and perfect passive infinitives because they have to agree with the subject in gender, number, and case. So futurum, not futurus, esse. That is the future infinitive of sum. Now, what if we change the main verb's tense, the introductory verb's tense? So now we have something like, I knew that Caesar was brave. Cicero thought that Caesar was brave. Pompey heard that Caesar was brave. So I know, or I knew, that Caesar was brave. Cicero thought that Caesar was brave. Pompey heard that Caesar was brave. Now we're back to the first example. Caesar is brave in the direct speech. All we've done here is change the tense of the main verb from a present time, present tense, to a past tense, a past time. So I knew that Caesar was brave. This also applies to the imperfect or the pluperfect. I was knowing or I had known that Caesar was brave. Check out what it does to the tenses of the infinitive. Hint, not a lot. I knew that Caesar was brave. When does this action, Caesar being brave, happen in relationship to the introductory verb's action? So I knew, past time, let's say last week. Last week, I knew that Caesar was brave last week at the same time. So this action is contemporaneous to this one, or we could say this action happens at the same time as that one. Cicero thought that Caesar was brave. Same thing. This action would be contemporaneous, same time to that one. And Pompey heard that Caesar was brave. This action would be contemporaneous, same time to that one. You're just going to use the present tense here for this infinitive because any action that is contemporaneous is going to be present. So I knew skiwi or skiebam or skiwaram that Caesar was brave. Once again, the subject of the indirect statement is in the accusative. And we're just going to put the present infinitive because this action happens contemporaneous or same time as that action. The only thing that's changed from what we were looking at previously is that this main introductory verb has now become past tense. And same thing with the other examples. Now, of course, what happens if we change the tense of the verb in the indirect statement? I knew that Caesar had been brave. So last week I knew then that Caesar had previously, before I knew it, been brave. Well, if you've been following along closely, you probably have guessed that we're going to use the perfect infinitive here because this is a prior action to this one. This action happened before this one. I don't care if this one action happened in the past. This action happened before this one. So it's prior. We want this to be the perfect tense. Scivi Caesarem fuisse fortem. I knew that Caesar had been brave. Caesar being brave happened prior to or before me finding out about it. Same thing with the other examples. Cicero thought that Caesar had been brave. Pompey heard that Caesar had been brave. I knew that Caesar would be brave? Yep. In English, we use would here instead of will. Cicero thought that Caesar would be brave. Cicero thought that Caesar will be brave. Kind of sounds a little off. That's why we use would. Pompey heard that Caesar would be brave. And once again, all we're doing is changing the tense to the future infinitive, because this action happens subsequent after this one. I don't care if this one happened in the past. This action still happens subsequent or after this one. So this one is future. Make sure that you remember it has to agree with the subject in gender, number, and case. Scivi Caesarem futurum fortem, futurum esse fortem. Now, I'm not going to get into what happens if you turn the main introductory verb into a future tense, because I think you can pretty much figure that out by yourself. Also, it sounds kind of odd, especially the verbs of knowing. Thinking or hearing tend to work out better. So Cicero, or not even thinking, Pompey will hear that Caesar will be brave. Pompey will hear that Caesar was brave or had been brave. Pompey will hear that Caesar will be brave, would be the subsequent action. Once again, if the actions are contemporaneous, then you will use the present tense for the infinitive in the indirect statement. If the action inside the indirect statement happened prior to the main introductory verb, the infinitive will be perfect tense for a prior action. If the action, like it is here, happens after or subsequent to the main introductory verb, this infinitive must be the future tense.